Donald Trump just threatened a 25% tariff.
The tariff. The word tariff to me is the most beautiful word in the entire dictionary. We're going to tariff the hell out of them.
I am a tariff man.
On all goods coming into the United States from Canada and Mexico. That would raise the price on food, medicine, cars, oil, lumber, concrete. And Trump says it would be a day one priority after his inauguration.
It's a bit of, rinse, wash, repeat, and that cycle going on again.
Even more of a negative downward pressure on U.S. economic growth.
Experts are warning this could eventually impact our wallets.
Yeah, this could directly impact our wallets.
But there's one big problem when it comes to interpreting what Donald Trump is proposing here, because there's the policy and then there's the posturing, and it's not easy to tell which of the two is real. Let's go through it.
The consequences are going to be devastating for Canada. The U.S. is our largest trading partner. Roughly 70% of the totality of our trade is with the United States.
A 25% tariff is effectively a 25% tax on whatever comes into the United States based on how expensive that thing is. So if a company's shipping in a $40,000 car, now it's a $50,000 car. The company pays the tax. That makes the vehicle more expensive for the consumer, and the U.S. government pockets the difference.
The basic rule of supply is that if the price goes up, I want to produce more of this stuff. If the price goes down, I want to produce less. It means I need less workers, and so people start losing their jobs.
And this is a big problem for a country like Canada, because last year it exported almost $600 billion worth of goods to the United States. That's more than 3/4 of all of Canada's exports. And Canada's trade relationship with the US is about 2/3 of this country's GDP. The top 5 exports: energy, that's mainly crude oil, and cars. And note, that includes car parts. The auto industry is a really good example of how damaging tariffs can be for those who have to pay them, because cars aren't just built in one country. The engine might be built in one place, the transmission in another. Then they're assembled in yet another place. And all of these components can cross national borders multiple times before they magically turn into a car. A tariff charges a tax every time they do.
The average car crosses the border 7 or 8 times, 8, 9 times over the course of its production. Trying to unwind that in a way that doesn't hurt American consumers is an incredibly difficult task. I spoke to one trade analyst in the United States who said, tinkering even a little bit with the fundamentals of that trade organization is like doing surgery without anesthesia.
And consider how some parts manufacturers have plants on both sides of the Canada-US border, and many ship parts between locations constantly. A company like that would have to completely rethink its supply chain, or else face 25% higher costs, sometimes multiple times for the same product.
If you're a manufacturer that is responsible for that supply chain, would you not just move your supply chain entirely into the US and forget the idea of having to deal with tariffs entirely?
Then there's the impact on everyday Americans.
Canada provides raw goods. We send energy, we send lumber, we send steel, we send grain. So American consumers, if these go ahead, are going to get clobbered by essentially taxes on everything they consume.
You know how much fruit and vegetables the U.S. imports from Canada and Mexico? According to the U.S. government, in 2022, about half of all fresh fruit and almost 90% of vegetables came from those two countries. All of that produce could become 25% more expensive, effectively overnight. Want to build a house? You might just be importing Canadian lumber and concrete. And the unfortunate side effect of tariffs is that they tend to start trade wars.
They put tariffs on some stuff, we put tariffs on some stuff.
Getting into a tariff war with the U.S. is like getting into a fight with a giant, where for every punch you throw, you get 4, back at you.
The last time the U.S. played hardball with tariffs, they didn't ultimately go very far.
Canada is bracing not just for the impact of tariffs, but potentially a larger trade war.
When Trump was last president, tariffs were part of a negotiation. A U.S. tax on steel and aluminum led to this.
President Trump's trade tariffs on Canada are sparking retaliation. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau promising comparable tariffs on the U.S.
Polite, we're reasonable, but we also will not be pushed around.
And in 2018, it was a really strange assortment of American products that Canada slapped tariffs on. Everything from ketchup to oranges to whiskey. But Heinz is co-headquartered in Pennsylvania, a key swing state. Oranges are grown in Florida. Whiskey is made in Kentucky and Tennessee. These are all states that voted Republican. And that pressure worked.
Everything ultimately settled back down to business as usual.
And get this, that same year, the Trump administration was mulling over a 25% tariff on all vehicles imported into the United States. Sound familiar? There was backlash.
Tariffs on autos and auto parts will raise costs for our customers and their families.
And that threat was very soon lifted. Canada-US trade normalized once again with an updated trade pact.
He's used trade threats to extract certain concessions from others. 2017, he threatened to pull out of NAFTA immediately. And then Canada and Mexico said, look, we're willing to renegotiate this agreement with you. And he said, fine, we'll come to the table and we'll talk.
We spent the entire first term of the Trump presidency talking about what was bluster, what was a threat, what was real. And what we learned is that it was a little bit of everything, but it was mostly a leverage point in a negotiation.
Trump's forte is in controlling the conversation. He puts his opponents on the defensive.
He's always talked about the art of the deal and what a great negotiator he is. Is this really something that he wants, or is this something that he's going to use as a bargaining chip to get something else that he wants?
And we should bear in mind, almost every expert I've heard from so far has underscored the very important point that we are still very early in the game. Trump isn't even president yet. His inauguration is 2 months from now. That's potentially 2 months of back-channel negotiation. And this expression of policy, if we can call it that, was just a social media post. On January 20th, as one of my many first executive orders, I will sign all necessary documents to charge Mexico and Canada a 25% tariff on all products coming into the United States and its ridiculous open borders. That last quip about open borders is the other reason it's hard to gauge how serious a policy proposal this really is. Because in this post, Trump isn't giving any economic reason to impose tariffs, and he would gladly remove them under the following circumstances. This tariff will remain in effect until such time as drugs, in particular fentanyl, and all illegal aliens stop this invasion of our country.
He decided to attach immigration and drug problems at the border with trade. And that's the path forward. And whether they have anything to do with one another or not doesn't really matter at this point. At the end of the day, he's using this as a wedge, as a tactic, and as a piece of leverage to get us to the table with concessions.
So look, this is a hard threat to read. It's early, Trump can be unpredictable, and if he follows through, he would have to explain to an American public how he so passionately campaigned on a promise to reduce inflation when his day one executive order is to effectively make all North American imports more expensive. But he could follow through regardless. And having that threat out there, hanging over his enemies and his allies, does a lot of heavy lifting in a negotiation before anyone at the table has even said a word.